You are watching the Orange and Black Insider, listening to the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, one of two ways, I guess, watching or listening. Welcome to the program. I am Anthony Cosenza. Happy to have you joining us on our Bengals podcast. It is the Wednesday deep dive show with myself, Anthony Cosenza. John Sheeran, how you doing, buddy? Happy hump day to you.
Yeah, I'm still contemplating if watching 4 hours of scoreless Reds baseball was worth it. It was the first baseball game I've watched entirely since opening day. And yeah, I think I'm like 37 years old now after being 24 when I woke up this morning.
But gosh, between Sunday and Wednesday for Cincinnati sports, good Lord, just can't get a result you want. Just beg and plead, and it's ties and heartbreaking losses. And I don't envy Cincinnati. I'm not a big Reds guy myself. I loved Pete Rose, but I do kind of keep an eye on him a little bit.
You're an Angels fan, though, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, a little bit. I like the sport of baseball, but I don't really have I'm not intense on a team.
I think that team is going to sign a future Cy Young winner pretty soon, named Trevor Bauer. But yeah, it's been a week, but a week where my co-host, I didn't say happy birthday last week, so I want to say that on the air now. Happy belated birthday. What did you do on your birthday last week?
Well, thank you. I didn't really want to promote it because, God, I'm getting old. Just a lot of family time. Unfortunately, just we're still kind of trying to be a little mellow with getting together with huge groups and everything. But, did kind of a family barbecue, a little bit of work, a little bit of fun, and then kind of parlayed that into watching the game on Sunday, which I was hoping I'd get a good birthday present from the Bengals, but they kind of gave me a half present this week. But I appreciate the well wishes, man. I won't tell you how old I am because it's too old.
Oh, it's for me to know and the audience to know.
Exactly. Well, we've got a lot on tap tonight. Thanks everybody for joining us. If you're joining us live, either on YouTube or Cincy Jungle's Facebook page, or if you are listening to the program after the fact, if you're able to try and get to us on the live recording, please join us. We have some fun and we try and interact with you all, whether it's on this show, the Listener Questions live show that we do almost every Friday, the post-game show, or the pre-game show that we've kicked off before every week, every regular season game for the Cincinnati Bengals, presented by Narragansett Beer. John, myself, and Matt Minnick do that one, and it's been fun. It's been fun. So join us for any amount of live broadcast that you can. Download the program if you're able on any really major audio streaming platform. We're on all of them. So we've got a lot on tap to get to tonight. We're going to talk and break down the tie, the 23-23 tie against the Philadelphia Eagles and the Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to do kind of what we've been doing the first couple of weeks, encouraged, discouraged. We're also going to add in another little fun game with that. We've got a quote of the week, or a soundbite of the week, I guess. It's not really a true audio soundbite. You'll see what I mean in a little bit. And then, of course, we've got a stat of the week, and then we will be previewing the game against the Jaguars. So a lot to get to. So it's been I guess we should just get right to it, John. The Cincinnati Bengals, they tied. And I guess let me just ask you a real quick question. I put this to the audience on the post-game show. Do you feel more like a tie, especially in this scenario? Does it feel more like a loss to you, or does it just feel because they're on the road, maybe they weren't expected to win, maybe it's kind of a pleasant surprise? I mean, what's your kind of immediate gut reaction when you watch 5 quarters of NFL football without a true result?
It's because the Bengals were the better team on Sunday. I think people can objectively say that. They were the better team on offense. They created more turnovers. They had averaged more expected points per play. Like, they were the better team, and usually the team with better numbers in those categories ends up on top. So when you have a result like this, it feels like a loss. But at the same time, in overtime, when the game was supposed to be decided, the Eagles had the best chance to win the game, and they blew it themselves. Just like the Bengals blew it towards the end of the game when they gave up the tying touchdown to Carson Wentz and all that. So it feels like a loss because the Bengals were the better team, and usually the better team wins in a situation like that. But when it mattered the most, the Eagles made the best play, or the most important play, to get themselves into overtime. And in overtime, they were in the best chance to win. So to them, I bet it feels like a definite loss to them as well. So, both, but more loss from the Bengals side, I guess.
I'm just putting up a couple of entertaining comments here from our live chats in the Facebook and YouTube channels. Mike Holbrook says, like kissing your sister, referring to what it feels like to tie. And Timothy Greg Lacey Jr., anything but a win is a loss. And that is the quote, actually, or something similar to it, that Joe Burrow used post-game when talking about this result. John, look, I guess we can kind of go into encouraged, discouraged. Joe Burrow, I believe it's self-explanatory. I think we can both say encouraged based on what we saw, even without that magician-like pass that he made in the second half being called back. Second straight 300-yard game, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, distributed the ball around, no turnovers, and sacked 8 times. Yet, just a pretty solid performance from their rookie quarterback. Set an NFL record by a rookie for completions through the first 3 games as well. So I am definitely encouraged. I continue to be encouraged by what I've seen by Joe Burrow. I assume that you feel the same way about him.
It was his best game of the year from an efficiency standpoint, from a decision-making standpoint. There weren't a lot of bad decisions that he made, and that's partly why his Pro Football Focus grade of like 86 or 85 was 5th highest in the league in week 3. So it was encouraging. However, like there's still some things that they're just leaving some points on the board. And that was the case a little bit against the Chargers in week 1. It happened a little bit against the Browns. And there were just a couple of throws that if Burrow makes, the game might go a little bit differently. And it's hard to put that on him because everything else is being put on him. He's got the second worst running game in the NFL right now. He's got probably the worst offensive line in the NFL right now. So to put any form of criticism on Burrow right now might sound blasphemous, but there are some throws that I think he should have made in this game. 2 of them to T. Higgins, to be specific, down the field. He's still 1 of 16 on throws 20 yards down the field, and not all of those attempts are with pressure in his face and how the pressure is altering him. So, like, it's encouraging because he still had a really good game, and I think he earned that PFF grade, and he played like the better quarterback on Sunday, but there are still things that he needs to do. And unfortunately, those plays need to happen because for the most part, this offense is just getting the ball up pretty quickly. It's a lot of half field, one play reads or one wide receiver reads, which is good in terms of keeping the offense moving. But when you have a lot of these negative plays in the run game, and also with him taking a lot of sacks because the offense line is that bad, like you need to hit on those big plays. You need him to make those throws that he made at LSU. And right now, he's just not connecting he's just not connecting very much or at all, really. Only 1 throw over 20 yards has been completed so far in 3 weeks. So he has to hit those throws to negate and counter all of the negative plays that are happening that are really outside of his control. So encouraging, but they still need to hit on those plays.
Let's move to the wide receiver group on encouraged or discouraged. Again, kind of a mixed bag performance here. Tyler Boyd, 10 catches, 125 yards. T. Higgins, the 2 touchdown catches and a couple of other nice grabs. Giovanni Bernard having the longest play from scrimmage in a pass from is like a nice little slant route across the middle that he took for 42 yards. Good ball dispersal, especially without CJ Uzomah out there. But you've got AJ Green still being a little bit of a non-factor. This time, the opportunities weren't there. There were a couple of opportunities that AJ Green gave Joe Burrow the first 2 games. He didn't really give Joe Burrow much of an opportunity there, and Darius Slay really locked him up throughout most of the game. So that's an issue. I see someone else talking here, Brandon Allen Penrod, saying T. Higgins dropped it. I assume that means that deep ball that Burrow floated to him at the end of the game there. So I guess, are you encouraged, discouraged, a little bit of both by what you saw from the wide receiver group, or I guess the pass catching group this week?
So Green didn't have a great game, but I mean, Tyler Boyd really did. And T. Higgins, I think, showed a lot of progress here with his 2 touchdowns. But also, there was this one 16-yard deep comeback where Burrow and Higgins were on the same page in terms of timing, in terms of when he released it off of his break. So that was encouraging to see. I think it was pretty evident that Higgins established himself as the starter in week 2 because he did start that game over John Ross. And now with Ross inactive, it was just full-blown get out there, Higgins, do what you can. And he had 9 targets and hauled in 5 of them for 40 yards. And people are, Brandon Allen Penrod in the comment section saying T. Higgins dropped it. Both of those throws to T. Higgins, like Higgins stacked the cornerback on those vertical routes, and unfortunately Burrow missed it by about 2 or 3 yards down the field, where if he had led Higgins, then there's no way either cornerback on those plays are going to make a play on the ball and knock the ball out of Higgins' hands. Higgins had to adjust both times, and the cornerback had the opportunity to make a play on it. So that's the reason why those plays didn't work out. It's on Burrow more than Higgins. But, I mean, Boyd had a great game. He had a good matchup against Nicole Roby-Coleman in the slide. They connected numerous times on very similar route concepts, and most of Burrow's best throws went to Boyd's way. So all that talk about Boyd being the true number one receiver in this offense is taking shape in week 3. And yeah, with AJ Green, I don't think he necessarily had a bad game. He didn't show, I guess, the rust or the age that we very much saw in week 2, but he just wasn't as involved in the offensive game plan and just the passing game as much as he was in the first 2 weeks. And overall, the offense was a little bit more efficient because they weren't forcing the ball his way. And Darius Slay had a great game. Like he had like you said, he smothered Green for a lot of his routes down the field. So it's encouraging that, even without John Ross, like the offense was still able to stretch the Eagles secondary vertically without that speed threat. And Auden Tate had a couple of good plays. I think they forced the ball to Tate in the end zone a couple times where it just wasn't the coverage was just too good, and they were just basically bad plays in general. But he had that one play on the sideline where Burrow scrambled out of the pocket and Tate found him and kept in bounds and made like a 19-yard grab. So definitely encouraging from the receivers, and overall, even without Ross and without Green having a good game.
Yeah, there are a couple of different plays that you think that, like you said, a couple of different plays that were left out there, right? The great play that Burrow made, avoiding the sack and tossing a dime to Higgins on the sideline. Unfortunately, the penalty called that back, and you wish that play would have stood, because that would have kept that drive moving, and it maybe would have caused a different result in the game altogether, especially with momentum given there. But, Higgins being a rookie, Burrow being a rookie, we know about the lack of a true preseason, lack of rapport potentially being built because of that. And you're still seeing some high production, 2 straight 300-yard passing games from Burrow. Again, 5 touchdown passes overall and only 1 interception on the year. So I think overall, even with the issue on the deep ball that you mentioned, the issue that caused T. Higgins to go out of bounds, and maybe some dry spells from AJ Green, I think I would be encouraged by what I saw from the pass catching group and their ability to work with Joe Burrow on that front. Let's move to the defense. I can't figure this group out, man. I cannot figure this group out. They're I think ranked, or they were into last week ranked 6th or 7th against the pass. They're doing pretty well against the pass. William Jackson's having a great season overall, but had an egregious pass interference penalty on the final drive of regulation, as did Darius Phillips. John, 2 pass interference penalties, netting 28 yards in a span of 3 total plays on the final drive of the game. It's like, what? So you have that. You have kind of some inconsistencies on the pass rush, though this week they went after an Eagles battered line and got to Carson Wentz. Still had a couple of sacks go through their grasp, had a forced fumble on a Carl Lawson sack that they didn't corral. So not perfect, and a lot of glaring issues, but at the same time, the Bengals offense only got 3 points off of the 2 turnovers that the Bengals defense gave them.
Mm-hmm. And it should be noted that a lot of backups for Philadelphia played significant snaps this game. They were down Dallas Goedert, who's now on IR at tight end. They had to play John Hightower, wide receiver, because Deshaun Jackson left the game. They barely had any receivers in this game to begin with, and they were down like 2 or 3 projected starting offensive linemen in this game. And like a guy named Matt Pryor started at right guard for them, and he had a pass blocking grade of 89.2. Like Carl Lawson is their entire pass rush right now, and he had a good game against Jason Peters for the most part. But Carlos Dunlap, Sam Hubbard, Mike Daniels, these guys are just not getting home, and they're not affecting the passing game in any way, shape, or form. Not even DJ Reader, who I think had a pretty good pass rushing season last year. He just hasn't made that impact as a pass rusher yet. So it was a battered Eagles offensive line, but Lane Johnson, Jason Kelly, like they're still good players. But they had matchups that they could exploit up there, and they didn't. And Carson Wentz, he had all the time to make the throws he needs to make. Unfortunately for him, he's just not playing well at all right now. But there was improvement from the linebacking core. I think Jermaine Pratt and Josh Bynes played much better in space. You had a big bounce back game from Logan Wilson, who not only had an interception, but played really well in the run game, which is improvement on what he did last week against the Browns. And like you said, like William Jackson, Darius Phillips played well for most of the game, but 2-minute defense in both at the end of both halves, at the end of the first half, the end of the second half. And at the end of the first half, unfortunately, they had that Randy Bullock kick that went out of bounds, and the Eagles started at the 40-yard line, but then they play soft zone. Eagles drive up the field a little bit. Then they had the miscommunication on Mackenzie Alexander's deep zone, and that allowed the touchdown. And then you had, like you said, you had those 2 pass interference plays that completely changed the course and got the Eagles in scoring position for Carson Wentz to run it in. So for the most part, they played really well, but it was against an offense that they should have played really well, because that quarterback, again, is not playing well, and they had a lot of injuries to deal with. So the Bengals had the talent advantage at basically all 3 levels and played decently enough. But again, it's relative to the competition that they faced. They should have played as well as they did. And when it mattered the most, though, they unfortunately came up short.
So I'm just doing a little promo for you, buddy. John Sheeran put up the Bengals weekly lineman on cincyjungle.com. Great write-up. And it does pump up Carl Lawson, who ate future Hall of Fame tackle Jason Peters lunch on Sunday. I mean, he just gave him all kinds of fits. So, you could chalk that up to Carl Lawson having one of his patented streaks that he goes on, or Jason Peters finally being caught up with by Father Time, or both. But anyway, I want to urge folks to check out this post by my co-host here. It's a good post on cincyjungle.com. But you mentioned, though, John, I mean, they got the 2 turnovers, could have had 1 or 2 more. They had 3 sacks, probably should have had at least 2 more. It's a lot of but with the defense. It's just they're not coming up in the key situations. And one of the things that frustrates me, and I guess this is where we're going to go next in terms of encouraged or discouraged from week 1. One of the things that frustrated me, and I've said this a couple times to some folks this week, but when one facet of the team ends up doing something well or making a big play, a la DJ Reader and Logan Wilson combining for an interception, they give the Bengals offense the ball at their own 44, great field position. They go 3 plays, 8 yards, and punt the ball from the Eagles' 48-yard line. You then score a touchdown to get your first lead of the game, 10-6, late in the second quarter. Ensuing kickoff, Randy Bullock kicks it right out of bounds, gives the ball to the Eagles at their own 40-yard line. They drive down and score. Bengals get a big 3 points at the end of the game and have a touchdown lead with 3 minutes left to play. They have those 2 pass interference penalties and allow the Eagles to march down the field. And so I think where you kind of want to immediately point to from big picture standpoint would be the coaching staff. So let's talk about that in terms of encouraged or discouraged, because we could talk about the offensive line and if we're encouraged or discouraged, John, but I think there's not much to be encouraged with there. And I think that could be kind of packaged into this current conversation. Look, the Bengals didn't lose this week. They scored 23 points, the second most they've scored all season. They were in a game, they're kind of the moral victories there, but they're 0-2-1. The offensive line is a mess. Like I said, the clutch plays are not being made, and one phase of the team is letting down another phase that creates a play. Is there even mixed emotions here, or is it all discouragement from the coaching staff of the Cincinnati Bengals right now?
Zach Taylor's taking a lot of heat, and deservedly so. He's 2-16-1 in his career. I don't think he called as bad of a game as a lot of people think that he did. When we watched the game, like there were definitely moments where like, what the hell is this dude doing? On multiple occasions, he asked Burrow to throw short of the sticks on 3rd down conversion attempts, and like we watched, like there was times where Drew Sample was in pass blocking against Brandon Graham on the edge, and that ended up in one of Burrow's 8 sacks. Yep. There were just a lot of questionable things that we saw in that game. I don't think when watching back through it, it was as bad as we think that it was. I overviewed a couple of those 3rd down conversions or attempts that both targeted AJ Green on these mesh concepts where they had rub routes over the middle of the field, and the design was fine. The execution in terms of creating that separation for Green, that was where it was off. And that's kind of like the whole genesis of what it is right now, which is what you're alluding to, where if you have good plays from one unit and then bad plays from the next, it's like there's potential for both sides of the ball to play up to whatever their potential level of talent is, but it doesn't always happen that way, because at the end of the day, this is the team that's still growing together. This is the team that still has a lot of deficiencies in a lot of places. And when you play on Sundays, sometimes you just don't play up to your level. And right now, I think it's almost equally a lack of execution and a lack of proper coaching. We can get into the offensive line all we want in a couple of minutes here, but I don't think Taylor called that bad of a game, but there were definitely some obvious miscues that it just shouldn't happen at this point, because all the excuses from last year about how he rushed to hire the staff and he didn't had some injuries thrown his way and everything was all haywire. Now this is year 2, and at this point, the issues that you're seeing, they can't be just chalked up to this staff is still new. No, this is the second year in the system. They have all of their guys, and some of these clerical issues that we're seeing still, they can't continue to happen. Not when you have a game where you can easily win going up against a lesser team when the other quarterback is blowing it in front of you.
The Bengals started the game with 4 straight punts, John. They ended the game with 3 punts and that draw play in overtime. I guess and some people, by the way, I got an F-bomb thrown my way from a follower on Twitter by calling this out. But look, he didn't go for it in the second drive of the game after the Bengals got the interception and they're sitting at the Eagles' 48-yard line. I think it's 4th and 2. Didn't go for it there. Okay. End of regulation, you kneel down. Okay. End of the game, you call a draw play and you just take the tie. I understand you're backed up against your own end zone there and there's not a lot of time, but those are 3 plays. I know the other side of the argument, but it looked like you're playing for the tie, especially in some of those latter 2 moments, and that's where I kind of have the problem.
Yeah, and you can say that for both coaches too, because there's no excuse why Doug Peterson should have punted that ball away. Right. So Zach kind of takes solace in the fact that the other coach screwed up first, but also we're getting comments in the comment section that you absolutely have to agree with. Like right now, they're second in the league in terms of run rate on 2nd and long, and plays that are 2nd and 8 or more. Like they're running the ball too much there. Like they can't run the ball in general. But and the whole logic about, and Zach Taylor mentioned this in this press conference, the whole logic about it is that you try to create a more manageable 3rd down conversion attempt where it's like 3rd and medium or maybe even 3rd and short, or maybe you convert the 1st down on the ground. When you're this bad at running the ball and you just don't have the personnel up front to gain movement on basically any scheme and concept that you design, it just hurts you more than just trying to get yards to the air. When you're in 2nd and long, it's already a bad idea to run the ball. They're running the ball way too much on 2nd and long. This was a problem in week 1. This was a problem in week 2. It became a problem in week 3 again. Like, I know that you want to use Joe Mixon as much as possible. You just gave him a contract. He's an athletic freak. He's talented, all that. It's fine. When you're having negative plays or just no progress plays on 1st down, you can't just keep feeding Joe Mixon for the sake of feeding Joe Mixon when you don't have the personnel to do it.
Yep. So do we want to go to the quote-unquote soundbite of the week, or do we want to go to the either-or portion first? What do you think makes more sense?
Let's just go to the soundbite.
Okay, well, it's not really a true soundbite. Usually we have an audio thing to share. We just kind of have the quote itself, so I guess it's more of a quote of the week rather than a soundbite of the week. But this is courtesy of Ben Baby, friend of the program, who helped us preview week 1 a couple of weeks ago. But the Bengals media members met with Jim Turner, and he gave a couple of quotes. This one is probably the jewel of them all, John. Jim Turner on Bobby Hart. I think that out of all of my players, Bobby is the most underappreciated player and most picked on player. The last part of that statement is just, it's unbelievable how much foot he put in his mouth on that one. But the other part, John, just in general, from an X's and O's standpoint, Bobby Hart, per all kinds of metrics, leads the NFL in pressures given up through 3 games with 15. The Bengals, via Football Outsiders, Joe Burrow's sack rate on dropbacks is close to, I think it's 10.6%. So it's close to 11%. So I mean that's our quote of the week. It's a little, I guess it's a little. I mean, if you want to extrapolate on that, go for it. Before we kind of do the either or, but I mean, it kind of speaks volumes for itself.
I wonder if Bobby Hart is more picked on than Jonathan Martin was back in Miami. I think Jim Turner might know a few things about that. But he did say my player. I don't know if Billy Price is considered his player because Billy Price was drafted before Jim Turner, and Jim Turner didn't give him any starting job when he was hired. He was actually benched for Trey Hopkins at center last year, and he hasn't started the game at right guard this year. But I think Billy Price actually played a worse game than Bobby Hart in this one. And in Turner's defense, I guess, a little bit, there are some positive plays from Bobby Hart. He's not playing terrible every single snap, but that's the really, really low bar for a starting right tackle in the NFL. Like the right tackle position is incredibly important. It's equally as important as your left tackle. And they invested a lot in getting the left tackle position right by spending the first round pick on Jonah Williams. The product that Bobby Hart is giving right now is just not good enough. It has never been good enough from the moment that he first started for the team back in 2018. And he's gotten a tiny bit better, but the bar is quite literally so low that if he's barely accomplishing it, and that's the standard that Turner's going off of, he's just propping up his guys to prop up his guys. I don't expect him to really say anything different because this is just kind of who he is, and he's just a bad evaluator of talent and pretty much a bad coach everywhere he's been. But it's still not a positive to hear.
Again, I've said this a couple of times, I feel like, but it to your point of it's not an every snap thing with Bobby Hart, but the snaps that there is a bad play or he loses in the trenches, it is a disaster. It ends up in a disastrous play. And it's not just like a miss and, oh boy, we dodged a bullet there. Or, oh, miss. And, oh, it was a 3 or 4 yard gain on a run instead of a 7 yard gain. It's like a disastrous play. It's a big penalty. It's a sack given up, that sort of thing. And so that's where he really comes under the spotlight. And when you lead the NFL in pressures given up per metrics, I believe it's PFF that gave that nod to Bobby Hart. I mean, it's hard to really continue to defend a player like that. So let's do that being the quote unquote soundbite. I guess it's more of a quote of the week, but that being the case, let's do a little quick either or. And what this game, John, is obviously this team has issues. Some of us may or may not have believed that the team was going to make a run in 2020, be it towards the postseason or at least be pretty competitive. I don't know that we figured that through this stretch they would be 0-2-1. Maybe thought we'd have a win or maybe even 2 in there based on how some of these games have played out. But let's talk about fixes and how to fix this thing quickly and most effectively. And there are a lot of people I see here, Andre Eakins, Jim Turner, and Lou, meaning Lou Anarumo, got to go. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about this real quick. And I am not a proponent of publicly calling for people's jobs, by the way. I am not that guy. I've lost jobs myself and it's not fun. So and publicly talking about getting rid of people is not a thing. It makes you feel a little icky, but when you're talking about football, that's kind of the nature of the business, unfortunately, John. So let's talk about the offensive line issues. You mentioned right guard being a mess with Billy Price. Fred Johnson gets benched at halftime after playing in the first in the game against Cleveland very poorly in that game, gets benched after the first half against the Eagles. Billy Price comes in. The Bengals get some points, move the ball, but then he has 2 disastrous penalties at the end of the game, and then I think his PFF score was very, very low overall as the game wore on. So offensive line issues. Hart, the right guard spot. Basically anyone not named Jonah Williams and Trey Hopkins are having consistency problems. Is the issue is the best remedy going forward to help salvage 2020? Is it get rid of Jim Turner, or is it let's try and plug and play it? Let's wait for Xavier Su'a-Filo, the guy who supposedly is a good fit on this offensive line. Let's wait for him to get back and get healthy, or let's take a look at Hakeem Adeniji at one of these right tackle, right guard spots.
I just don't think he's going to get fired. And I know that wasn't the question, but even like after the season, I just don't think he's going to get fired. I think there's just too much history with him And Zach, they're essentially family members. Like it's a whole family tree with Mike Sherman, and that's the reason why he was brought into the first place. He had zero qualifications aside from the fact that he was a Marine, and we just glorify the troops regardless of who they are as actual people. But like that's the reason why Jim Turner came here in the first place. And I think relative to the expectations that Zach Taylor had for him, he's accomplishing it. It's like Jim Turner's expectations for Bobby Hart. It's all relative to what the baseline is. So I mean, they have to try as many people as possible at these spots. Like right now, I think Turner said that Adeniji is the backup right tackle. So I guess they have no interest in playing him at guard, even though he played at guard at the Senior Bowl when they were down there watching him. And they've always been high on Adeniji, even before the Senior Bowl. And they saw him play pretty decently there. So that would be my solution. I think they should try Adeniji at right guard and try Fred Johnson at right tackle. I think Johnson would just fare better at tackle. I think he's just more naturally built for there. And if they want to try hard at right guard to alleviate some of his pass protection issues, I think someone in the comments section actually suggested that I would be interested in that. But right now, you can't roll out Billy Price at right guard again. You probably can't roll out Fred Johnson again. Like he was benched after the first half because he was the guy responsible for giving up that sack at the end of the first half, despite having a decently okay first half. But it's just not good enough. It's not good enough going against teams like the Eagles to have multiple guys at defensive tackle that can push the pocket against you. They can't roll out Billy Price. They can't roll out Alex Radman either. Like they're probably going to elevate him from the practice squad this week, and maybe he gets a chance sometime in this week 4 game against the Jaguars if whoever starts ahead of him has another struggling game. But like they need to just roll as many options as possible, because as much as I think we would all like Jim Turner to be fired, secretly without actually saying it, I just don't think much is going to change, because they're just going to promote Ben Martin, the assistant offensive line coach, who was hired when Turner was here, and I think it has the same core principles in terms of coaching style and coaching ability. So I'm not sure much is going to really improve. I just want to see all the options exhausted before we get to that point.
Side note, if you earlier this summer, our own Matt Minnick had an interview with Ben Martin, and I came away impressed with that guy's intelligence in terms of the game and whatnot. But go back in the archives and check out that interview. It's a pretty interesting one. Two offensive line guys chatting. It was pretty interesting. But I tend to agree with you there. Now, what do you think, John, is a better solution? Continuing on the offensive line, either or, bring in a street free agent of some kind. Our good friend James Rapine in the All Bengals Sports Illustrated site laid out a couple of nice options, or potentially Band-Aid type of options for the offensive line, or somehow change up the scheme like they did late in 2018, late in 2019, whatever that formula is, and try and recreate what you've done the last half of the past 2 seasons.
Like what scheme in terms of pass protection is going to make it better? Like there's only so much that you can go in terms of hiding your offensive line. They did that in this game against the Eagles. There was a few plays where they motioned Auden Tate across the formation, but he stayed in the formation to help pass protect. They had Drew Sample helping on pass protection a lot, and just having 7-8 guys in pass protection, only 3 or 2 receivers going down the field, and it still doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, like they can only help so much, and it limits what you can do from a passing standpoint. So I think they've already tried to keep more guys in protection, and I guess that's the scheme alteration that you can have here. But there's only so much in terms of just coaching pass protection and schematically that can actually help you and change things. Because at the end of the day, most of these are just one-on-one situations, and it's just bad technique from starting or just rostered NFL guys like Billy Price and Bobby Hart getting beat off the snap like 1.5 seconds into the rep and allowing a free rusher right into Burrow's lap. Like that's just stuff that can't happen. It's stuff that shouldn't happen for guys who are playing significant snaps in the NFL, regardless of the level of competition. There's just only so much that you can do from a schematic standpoint, and it just comes down to just bad coaching at this point. Like these guys are just experienced and tenured NFL veterans, and they're still making these mistakes. So part of it is them just being bad, but also part of it is just the coaches just not getting anything out of them. So there was a trade scenario that our good friend Andre Parada mentioned earlier this week about trading for Kevin Zeiler. I would definitely explore that if the Giants are interested in unloading his contract for the next 2 years. I think a street free agent of any kind, just any new blood to inject into this right side of the offensive line would be better, because I just don't know how much more you can do from a schematic standpoint to help these guys out.
So let's move on. By the way, I agree. I mean, it's tough to disagree with that. I think it's just it's a personnel issue at this point. I mean, you got to get more talented players there, whether that's through trade, free agency, what have you. I mean, your scheme can only, like you said, mask so much before before you got to start looking at player evaluation. So let's talk running game. One of the things I thought of is, I mean, Joe Mixon's a patient runner. He tries to find things. He cuts back a lot. He tries to create. Do you think that it's a play call issue? Because you mentioned, and I agree with you, that doing the second and long runs kind of almost no matter what. Do you think a play call difference is going to improve that? Or do you think mixing in more carries for Gio Bernard just to kind of mix up the looks a little bit and mix up the runners to kind of maybe put the defense on its heels a little bit? Do you think that helps at all remedy some of the run game issues? Or is it still the offensive line is who it is?
The offense, it is who it is. And right. I think they're doing a decent job of using the running backs in the passing game as an extension of the run game, because they're like they want to minimize how many straight dropbacks Joe Burrow takes, because that just minimizes how many times he gets hit. They know that if he goes back 40, 50 times a game, he's going to get hit close to 10 times. And any one of those hits could be the last snap that Joe Burrow plays this year. They know that they don't have the offensive line to succeed in ways that the Kansas City Chiefs do, and which is why they just can't compete this year, why we're never going to be able to compete this year. So I think they have awareness without actually saying it, and I think they still want to do some things in the running game that they wanted to do in the offseason. But like you mentioned, how they adjusted the overall run blocking scheme and the running concepts in the middle of the last two seasons, I think that eventually probably happens. And we're kind of seeing it now against the Eagles. Like, there were a lot of just sweeps where you had pulling offensive linemen out to the edge, and the Eagles just ate it up. And I think most of them ended up being either negative plays or plays for 0 yards. So we're already seeing that kind of transition and evolution of the running game. I guess de-evolution, because considering what the results are. So I would promote them to continue to try to use the running backs in the passing game. And that was like the most effective play of the entire game was a very interesting screen design to Giovanni Bernard, who ran for like 40 yards. And it was helped by a couple blocks by Ethan Carter and Billy Price, who got out in space and created a path for Gio. So they're on the right path. They're not there yet. But again, like they can't be running this much on second and long. You just got to put your faith in Burrow. I know that they don't want him to get hit as much as he has, but that's the only chance for your offense to succeed.
Let's talk. We'll do this for a couple more minutes before we get to the stats of the week here. Let's talk the AJ Green issue, because I know everybody wants to see him get going, and there's been a couple of misses on some open deep plays. There's been a lack of separation by AJ in these first couple of games. So what do you think? Is it either just give it more time? The guy's missed a lot of time. He missed some time in training camp. Maybe it's a conditioning issue. Or do you think bringing back out the speed guy in John Ross to command more attention gives AJ Green a little bit more room and a little more cushion to create these big plays? What's going to get the big passing plays to get going? You mentioned, I think, what'd you say, 1 of 16 so far for deep balls by Burrow? Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if any of them are going to come to AJ Green at this point. Like, I think that they like Tyler Boyd on some of the deep over routes, and they want to continue to use T. Higgins's verticality in that sense. If again, like those 2 third down attempts, if they succeeded, AJ Green probably finishes close to like 80 or 90 receiving yards, because he had a lot of yards after catch potential on both of those plays. So if a couple of things happen in this season, AJ Green is well over like 150, almost 200 receiving yards. And maybe these questions aren't as prominent as we're getting up to, but if Green is like the second or third option in the passing game now, I think that's fine. Like we knew that Tyler Boyd was going to have an increased role because he's like the new Justin Jefferson, and we knew that T. Higgins was going to emerge as a starter sooner or later, and that chemistry with Burrow was going to click. So if Green is just now adjusting to a more, I don't want to say minor role, but just not that true dominant X number one guy who's being force fed by Andy Dalton, I think that's okay, because he is on the older side now in his career, and he might not be as dynamic of an athlete as he was, but he can still do things effectively, and he still had a decent game despite Darius Slay playing pretty well. But when it comes to John Ross, like there's the only value that the guy had was he created he just had an innate sense of verticality that forced the opposing secondaries to be honest and not, not play too conservative with that, because he had that speed to get over the top, but he just can't do anything on the field when the ball's thrown his way. And that's why Tate got the nod here and got like 5 or 6 targets in this game and played over him. So I don't know when you put Ross back into the equation. I think he still has more value than Alex Erickson in that sense, where Erickson just has no value as a receiver. But like I'm okay with what Green is right now, but like when it comes to Ross, there's just only so much more that we can expect from him at this point.
Right. I don't think Ross is the key there to AJ Green. And I think for the most part, I agree with you. I think I'm a little more patient than most folks are, because I've seen a couple of plays to AJ that were there. One big play in the first 2 weeks. There was a big open play against the Chargers that he was wide open. Burrow just missed him. And then there was a play where he kind of had a step or two on a defender against Cleveland down the left sideline. Burrow kind of floated a tiny bit out of bounds. AJ made a great effort to try and come down with that ball and just couldn't get the second foot down. So some of the plays have been there. I think, to your credit, John, on your Twitter account, that the one bad throw at the end of the game, short of the sticks to AJ, where everyone's going, that's your third down play. It looked like there was a missed pick on that play. That was a good breakdown by you there. And so that could have been something where that's a yards after the catch play. But yeah, I'm not convinced Ross is the guy really at this point to open that up. I think just a little more time, maybe a little bit more rapport. I'm not the most patient guy, but I'm willing to be a little patient here with AJ Green. There's a lot more that we could get to in this either or. This was fun though. We'll maybe do this more. Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully it won't be a continuing thing because the Bengals will be improving, but maybe we'll do a little bit more of that. We're going to get to the stat of the week or stats of the week in just a second. My co-host will be sharing some interesting stuff on that. Before we do, just want to remind everybody to get this show on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, Megaphone, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your audio podcast streaming services. Find our channel, Cincy Jungle, where you can get this program. You can get Orange is the New Black with Ace and Zim, and Chalk Talk with Matt Minnick. A lot of good stuff being put out by those guys. So check it out and join us live on our YouTube channel or Cincy Jungle's Facebook page. Every episode we'll be streaming live to you. Or of course you can, if you like the video format more, you can go to those platforms to check it out from there.
Yeah, so let's get into stat of the week. And since we kind of segued into this topic, talking about the offensive line is kind of where I wanted to go with mine. We all remember that Joe Burrow played at T. Higgins that unfortunately didn't count, but it was the Joe Burrow that we saw at LSU. The guy creating plays out of nothing, out of structure, and finding guys down the field for stuff that we just couldn't even dream of with Andy Dalton. Unfortunately, that play didn't count, so it was essentially an incomplete pass. There were a couple missed blocks on that play from Billy Price and Bobby Hart, which is why Joe Burrow was forced to scramble out of the pocket. From that play on, that was the middle of the fourth quarter. The Bengals had, I believe, like 15 more dropbacks, so 16 total dropbacks for Joe Burrow from that point on. And they created a total of negative 2.2 expected points added. So like on average, like they're losing about 0.15 expected points added per play. They only had 4 positive plays going forward from that one missed opportunity to T. Higgins because he stepped out of bounds. And from that, because Hart and Price both had bad blocks on that play. Like after every game, I try to chart, very subjectively, I know, but I try to chart essentially every offense rep from every offensive lineman and just count how many like actually bad reps that they are. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to be like bad enough where they negatively impact the play, but just bad technique, bad process, all that stuff. Just stuff where an offensive line coach would say, hey, this needs to be corrected. Price and Hart from that point on combined for 15 bad reps. It was just a point where like every other play, either Price or Hart was messing up in pass protection. And a lot of those were impactful in terms of getting Burrow pressured or hit as he threw, forced some bad throws from Joe Burrow as well. Like from that point on, Hart and Price were were basically the two players that everybody drags on for good reason. Like they were just terrible. And that doesn't even, and I didn't even count the Price false, the holding call on Bailey Price or the false start on him. He had like 2 flags in this game, and both of them were critical. But they were plays that just like they didn't count in terms of the actual scorebook. So I didn't count them. I only counted the actual plays that did count. And combined, Billy Price, Bobby Hart, 15 bad reps. Price at 8, Bobby Hart at 7. Like up until that point, Bobby Hart was playing pretty decently. And I think that's the film that Jim Turner watched in this game where he thought that Bobby Hart played okay. But from that point on, like both those guys were just terrible. And the offense as a whole was just not good enough.
Good stuff, John. By the way, I just wanted to share this. I like the name for, I don't know if you saw this, from Big Jim Slade in the YouTube channel, the GOAT, GEAUXT, referring to Joe Burrow. I hadn't heard that one before. I like that one. That may need to catch on there. But yeah, good stuff, John, and very in-depth, very disheartening statistic, that stat of the week that you just shared with us. I'm going to share one, and I'm not going to go too long with it. Again, I'm going to reference our good buddy Ben Baby here. This is, I think, a stat that a lot of people know by now, but it's something that bears repeating. The Bengals have tied the longest winless streak in one-score games in NFL history with 15. Obviously, that would be 14 losses and one tie now. They've matched the 38-41 Chicago Cardinals. So that dates back to 2018 and into this year. John, Zach Taylor now is getting this reputation for not being able to close out these types of games. And it's almost, when you predict the Bengals to win, it's almost like, well, you have to predict them by 10 points because if it's anywhere close, they're not going to win the game. So, I understand young coaching staff still, even though 19 games in, still a bit inexperienced. I understand the issues of the past 2 off seasons that this coaching staff has faced. I understand the injuries that this coaching staff has faced. I understand major roster turnover this year, but this has been a plague upon the Bengals for a long time in terms of, quote unquote, finding a way to win, grabbing a win out of the jaws of defeat, whatever old adage you want to use. And they still have yet to do it. And this streak now, much of it under Zach Taylor's watch, is a dubious one. And it's just it makes you speechless when you see that stat.
It's just wild. Like, we're in year 2 and we're having questions being asked to Zach Taylor. Like, is it just about learning how to win? Because that's literally what it is now. Like, we're talking about an NFL coach learning how to win. And I know it could be worse. They could be the Jets. They could have Adam Gase running the crap show into the ground and whatnot. But it's remarkable to witness every single week. Whereas, and I think Matt said it in our pregame show, like, I don't know why you guys are predicting one-score games before the Bengals win. Like, they can't do that. Like you said, they have to win by multiple scores in order to comfortably win and just hold off whatever lead that they gain. Like this was a game that they should not have lost. And there were many games in the past couple of years where they were in that same spot. Like, when they were up a touchdown, like, and I tweeted out, like, this is the first time I remember them having like some comfortable lead in a close game in the fourth quarter. It was the first time since the Bills, even though they were leading against the Browns and the Jets, but those games were pretty lopsided in the Bengals' favor because of reasons that were independent to those specific weeks. But that game against the Bills, like, it was heavily contested throughout. It was pretty equally matched. And the Bengals took a lead in the fourth quarter and they ended up blowing it. And it was the same situation for this, only the Eagles just couldn't capitalize and actually win the game. So it is a factor of just learning how to hold the lead and learning not to make the critical mistakes that you may be prone to do so if you are trying to take the lead. It's just a different mindset, and one that you would expect like a high school team to have issues going through, not a team where it's filled with professionals.
It's one thing when you're 1-11 and you're down by a field goal and you're driving and this team is injured, it's not very good, the quarterback situation's a mess, and they end up missing out and lose by 3 or 4 points and the season's already out of control. It's another thing when you have a touchdown lead, you have your new franchise quarterback, you had a big offseason adding all these additions, and you let that lead slip away and you ended in a tie. It's just inexplicable. And the Bengals, if Zach Taylor wants to keep his job, I think he's safe through this year, by the way. But if he wants to keep his job, he's got to start winning those games, because that stat is going to get worse and worse and worse and more popular for the wrong reasons as it goes on. We're running a little long, John, so let's get to previewing the game against the Jaguars. I watched a bit of the Thursday night game, mostly just to see Ryan Fitzpatrick's beautiful post-game outfit. If you didn't get to see that, he was just unbelievable. But I wanted to kind of get a look at the Jags as well, and I came away unimpressed. And last year, I was not impressed with the Jaguars, and they ended up beating the Bengals anyway. Gardner Minshew still their starting cornerback. What is your kind of mile-high view of the Jaguars and opinion of them as they come to Cincinnati this week?
Well, they're pretty equally rated. I think they're only like a couple spots ahead of the Bengals on Pro Football Focus's DVOA metric, but it's kind of the opposite. Whereas the Jaguars were really good on offense the first 2 weeks, and they just hit a wall against the Dolphins. I think they believe that they should have been 2-0 going into that week. They lost a close game against the Titans, and they went into Thursday night thinking that they were going to run the Dolphins off the field, and the exact opposite happened, where the Dolphins just had a great game with Ryan Fitzpatrick at the helm, and Gardner Minshew played bad. And Gardner Minshew started on that incredible high of completing 19 of 20 passes against the Colts in week 1, played pretty decently against the Tennessee Titans in a week later, and then just hit a wall. And unfortunately, there's a reason why we thought that the Jags were just openly tanking. They were liquidating all the talent that they had. I wasn't aware of anyone else on the defensive line that played for them aside from Josh Allen, the guy from Kentucky. I don't know a single name for who plays in their secondary right now. And if Gardner Minshew doesn't play good, they have little to no chance of winning a football game. And that's why the Bengals are, I think, a 3-point favorite right now, even though they are playing at home. They're playing a team that's only 1-2. But their defense is just terrible. They have Miles Jack. They signed Joe Schobert at linebacker, but he hasn't necessarily been impressive. They just can't really rush the passer aside from Josh Allen. And again, they just don't really have anybody in the secondary that should threaten anybody in the Bengals wide receiver core, or shouldn't threaten Joe Burrow as well. This is a game where Joe Burrow should continue to build off that game against the Eagles. And I think the offensive line has a chance to just keep Burrow clean for the most part. All they got to do is neutralize Josh Allen, and they're pretty much set. They have guys like RB Jones and Taven Bryan, and just guys that just shouldn't. This is a matchup where the Bengals offensive line can actually look pretty decently, because they just have no one that can rush the passer at all, even against bad offensive linemen. So this is a game that the Bengals should win. There's a reason why they're favored, because if Gardner Minshew doesn't play like he did in week 1, I just don't see them catching up to the Bengals offense.
So this is the latest injury report, and this is on cincyjungle.com as of Wednesday. So there are a couple of pieces of good news and a couple of pieces of not so good news. The good news, you see guys on here like Carlos Dunlap, AJ Green, and it's basically just veteran rest day. So, nothing really to worry about there, it would seem. You got Darius Phillips out there with a knee issue, which is interesting because he didn't really, I think he played almost every snap but one last week. So, but he's limited. So he did practice. Fred Johnson dealing with a wrist injury, but he is full go. And then the biggest piece of good news, Geno Atkins with the shoulder limited practice. I would assume he plays this week. And this is one of those patented Geno Atkins going up against a lesser offensive line to wreak some havoc. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. And him being limited today on Wednesday is good news for him actually playing on Sunday. I think he was still just going through individual drills, which essentially means he's not ready, 100% ready to go in team and essentially be 100% ready to play in the next game. But we're going to find out more about that on Thursday and Friday. It should be reminded that Darius Phillips missed half the year last year with a knee injury. So if this is the same knee that's kind of flaring up or giving him some consistent problems, it might linger for the rest of the week and potentially cause him to be out. If one of Darius Phillips or Mackenzie Alexander is out, I wonder if they play, if Phillips plays and Alexander doesn't because he has a ribs and hamstring injury. I wonder if Phillips goes into slot cornerback and they start LaShawn Sims at the boundary corner because Sims was in the game, I think, for Phillips for like a couple plays, and he did get an interception against the Eagles. So kudos to him. But I think if one of those guys is out, I think we see Sims take one of those spots. It's still too early to tell and forecast who's going to play and who isn't. But yeah, those are notable injuries that, if they both can't play, then that's the situation where Minshew can utilize guys like Laviska Shenault and DJ Chark and Keelan Cole and maybe attack this secondary down the field if they're down one of the two of those guys.
Daniel's also getting rest. I know he hasn't shown up on the stat sheet, and I know there's been maybe a lesser effectiveness on defense with him kind of getting the heavy bulk of snaps, but you got to give him kudos. I think both he and the Bengals coaching staff did not envision him getting as many snaps as he has over these first 3 games, and I think you will see once Geno Atkins comes into this game, I think you'll see a much more effective Mike Daniels in this group, but he's resting. He's been having a lot more snaps than I think a lot of people envisioned for him. You mentioned Alexander didn't practice on Wednesday, and then Logan Wilson. I don't know what to make of this one because he didn't really leave the game, I don't believe, with a concussion, and now he's dealing with the symptoms there. Did not practice on Wednesday. How do you think the Bengals get by without him should he not be able to play on Sunday? Because he made a couple of really nice steps in the right direction in this game, not just with the interception, but he had his nose to the football a couple of times, stifling some plays by the Eagles.
It could very well be Marcus Bailey time, and Wilson only played, I think, 20 snaps or just somewhere around there. So neither that injury or the Darius Phillips injury was officially reported during the game. So we have no idea when it happened. There was one hit though, where Logan Wilson kind of led with his helmet, and he didn't stay on the ground, or I don't think he did. So it was never evident that he did actually suffer a concussion. But I mean, it's football; these things pop up without us noticing sometimes because these guys are just taking hit after hit after hit, and sometimes it just kind of catches up to you. So yeah, if Wilson can't go, I'm looking it up right now. Jordan Evans has played 1 snap on defense at linebacker. He's really only there to play special teams.
Yep.
And if Wilson can't go, they still need Davis Gaither to play on some of those passing downs on 2nd and long and 3rd down. If Wilson can't go, I think you inject Marcus Bailey, see what he's got. To have him take the role that Wilson was playing. Very similar athletes, guys that you can be trusted to do similar things in terms of coverage, be that hook, curl zone player, and just stay in your run fits. So I would be interested to see what he can do if Wilson can't go. It is a concussion, so we have no idea how long this is going to last. And I don't think it's fair to just rush him back to this game if he's not ready. But if he can't, Marcus Bailey, let's see what you got.
This game to me, John, seems like the perfect bounce back, get things right opportunity. Feel good about your football team. Feels like, because yes, they are favored and only by a field goal, but it feels like a game that they should win, especially even if you want to take that tie as a minute baby step forward, 2 losses, and you take a tiny, tiny step forward with a tie. You got a winnable opponent coming to you. What does this game mean? Even though it's the Jacksonville Jaguars, they're a 1-win team to this point. How important is this game, not only for the morale and control of the locker room if you're Zach Taylor, but just and the outlook of 2020, but just how important is this game for him, given what's transpired over the past 19?
Well, for starters, I would have to imagine that's exactly what the Eagles thought last week. Because that's just who the Bengals are right now. They were the worst team in the NFL last year, and they haven't won a single game this year so far. Right now, they're in the basement. They're at the bottom of the barrel. Everyone's looking at them like, when we play the Bengals, this is our get right game. So it's fair for the Bengals to look at the Jaguars and think that same thing because they're allowed to think that. But at the same time, the Bengals are absolutely the other guy at the other side of the equation. So yeah, it is an incredibly important game. This is I think next week they play the Ravens, who are going to be pissed after being embarrassed by Kansas City in primetime. And they're still one of the best teams, if not the best team in the NFL right now from just an overall macro standpoint. The Bengals have no chance against the Ravens. I think they play the Titans a couple weeks after that. They play the Steelers a couple weeks after that. The schedule's only going to get tougher after this for the next month or so. like this is the game that they need to win. That they need to win and they need to play well. Like it would be nice for them to get like that close win to get the monkey off the back, but they need to win by at least like 10 points, I think, to establish that like there is some hope for growth this year, because that's what this year was all about. It wasn't about making the playoffs, even though that was an irrational expectation by a lot of fans and a lot of listeners on the show. But like showing growth from last year, showing that the process, the culture is working, it's building in the right direction. If they lose this game, it's going to be hard to see more than like 2 or 3 wins for the rest of the year.
Yep. What's to me, I think this is a game that where the key is the finding of at least some semblance of offensive balance. I know the Bengals are effective in scoring points with Joe Burrow throwing the ball 40 plus times. I know he's showing improvement from week to week, and I know he looks every bit of the part of a franchise quarterback, but to limit hits and to just find some semblance of balance and maybe get that deep ball going, maybe get a play action game going, I think this needs to be a game where the Bengals show balance. That's a key for me. What are some keys for you in this game if the Bengals want to come out on top?
Well, again, like they only really have to worry about Josh Allen from a pass protection standpoint. I know they have K'Lavon Chaisson, who they just drafted in the first round, so he's going to be playing snaps across from Allen, and obviously Chaisson and Burrow have a history both playing at LSU together. But there's an opportunity for the offensive line to look better, just because the competition is equally as bad for what they do. They're not that much impressive in terms of run defense. They have guys like Josh Jones, DJ Hayden, who have been pretty decent from coming downhill from the secondary. Myles Jack is playing really well at linebacker. He's by far their best player on their entire team, and he's playing out of his mind, but he can't really do it all. Like they don't have a lot of guys on the defense line between Allen and Chaisson. They have RB Jones and Tavion Brown, Davon Hamilton, Adam Gostis, like just guys that are just generally unimpressive in terms of that front seven. That there's an opportunity for Joe Mixon to get something on the ground going, but this offense should score somewhere in the high 20s or maybe even 30 points. Like this defense just can't really do a lot to counter the weapons that the Bengals have. And when Joe Burrow's playing like he has and he continues on this progression, like he should have no problem scoring in the high 20s this game.
Player for me to watch on the Jaguars is Laviska Shenault. I liked him in the pre-draft process. Pac-12 guy, interesting player. We'll see what the Jags draw up for him. Anybody in specifically you're watching, whether it's for Jacksonville or the Bengals this week?
Yeah, I want to see how Jawan Taylor plays. He is the right tackle drafted last year in the second round, a guy that the Bengals, I think, almost could have drafted in the second round before they traded down to get Drew Sample, but he's playing pretty decently, I guess, in his second year. They still have Cam Robinson at left tackle, but Taylor's going to face off against guys like Hubbard and Dunlap for the game, and I think both of those guys need a good game because neither of them have won consistently as pass rushers so far this season, and Taylor's been decent, but again, like this is an opportunity for both Dunlap and Hubbard to get something going against the young tackle.
Yeah, I saw Taylor got beat against Miami on Thursday night. He got beat for a sack once, but overall, you're right. He has been a pretty solid little right tackle for him. And I shouldn't say little because he's a big old boy, but
yeah,
but yeah, good player to watch there and good point. So let's get a prediction and then we will drop the mic and get on out of here. I know you just love giving predictions, John. That is your forte. What do you foresee happening this week when the Jaguars come to town and play the Cincinnati Bengals?
Like last week, when I was on the Eagles podcast, giving my prediction, I was pretty confident that they were going to hit the over, and I just probably shouldn't do that at all for any Bengals games. I think the over/under is 47.5, which is pretty low considering how most games in the NFL have gone this year. But the Bengals are still favored, and I think they're favored for a reason. I think a 27-19 Bengals victory sounds pretty good. 8 points, still one score, but it feels like a little bit more.
Barely. Barely.
Yeah.
Barely. Okay, so you have 27-19, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be a little bit beyond a one-score game. I think this has Joe Burrow's first win as a pro written all over it, and I have 31-20 Bengals. I think the Bengals give up a little bit of points, but I think some of that, they shoot out to a lead, hopefully early, and they're able to find that balance that I spoke of in the run game and in the passing game where they can limit some of the hits on Burrow. my gosh, he's been hit a lot. So I think 31-20 Bengals this week. We'll see what happens. And you can join us on the pregame show by Narragansett Beer. John, myself, and Matt Minnick, an hour before kickoff. Join us. We have a little fun. We talk about the game. We talk about our tailgating rituals. We have some guests. We have giveaways. So join us. It's a fun time. John, let's drop the mic and get out of here. What do you got for us?
A couple weeks ago, I should have given this shout out earlier. I went over to my grandma's house, who actually lives about a mile away from my apartment. It's one of the perks of living in this part of Cincinnati. And while I was over there, she said, yeah, I was looking through my stuff in my basement, and I found something that I think you might like in your new apartment. I don't know how old these little glasses are, but I freaking love them. You know, like I love like the striped helmet, but I do think that this aesthetically looks pretty good on this glass. I have like 6 of these that my grandma had in her basement. Nice. Like she bought them. I think her and my grandpa bought them like back in the 70s when they first came out. For people who know, like my grandpa had season tickets for the Bengals when they first started playing in Nippert Stadium. He had them all the way up until he passed away in 2012. And me and my dad used the season tickets to go to basically every home game from like 2005 to 2012 or 2011 before he passed. So my grandpa was a big Bengals fan. He was obviously a pessimist because that's kind of who he was, and the Bengals were the Bengals. But
easy to be that way.
Yeah. So shout out to Grandma Sheeran. And also I saw her today, and that's why I thought of her. I saw her today, and she gave me even more stuff from my apartment. And she called me like about an hour before I went over there, and she was talking to me about the Reds game and talking to me about the Bengals game. And she said, yeah, that guy who hit Burrow, like he should be ejected. Like, I don't know why he was doing that. And Malik Jackson, I know you're watching this, and shame on you if you piss off my grandma.
Yeah, that was a vicious hit. I guess, are those little bourbon tumblers? Or are they stemless wine glasses? Or maybe you could use both? Or
I think someone said that they're technically wine glasses, but I'm not that much of a wine drinker. Beer's going into this.
Okay. I was going to say that looks like a good seltzer chalice for you, my friend.
You know me so well.
Well, that's cool. I'm envious. Those things are awesome. You know, I did so much show prep. I don't know if I really have a true mic drop. Just that we've seen this show grow quite a bit, and it's it's been because of your efforts, John. It's also just been bringing in some great talent outside with Ace and Zim and Matt, and so I'm just grateful for it. And I know we haven't had a special guest like we had on the regular in spring and summer, but we're still getting a lot of interaction, a lot of views and stuff. And I guess I want to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the listeners. As always, it's always so flattering that everybody joins us live, listens to us after the fact. And, I'm appreciative. And I think I can speak for my co-host on that one. So thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, I mean, guys, like Anthony runs the show here. Like I'm just along for the ride. Everything, the quality of the show is not the same if Anthony doesn't put in the work that he does every single week. The growth of it is mainly attributed to him. The constant work that he's been putting in, even with some restrictions that aren't exactly public with him and his involvement with the site. So, Anthony, oh wow, my throat's really dry right now. But if I can speak normally,
drink out of the cup, Bengals cups.
We always do this. We always get so sappy at the end of the show.
I know. But it's good. It's good. And it's a 2-man deal, my friend. It's a 2-man deal for sure. And I wasn't bringing it up to stroke the ego. I just wanted to say a little thanks to you and the listener and everything. You and the listeners, but the one listener. But yeah, thanks everybody. And we will see you Friday for listener questions live. We'll see you for the pregame show and the postgame show. So join us for all of it as the week rolls on and the Cincinnati Bengals host the Jacksonville Jaguars for week 4. For John Sheeran, I'm Anthony Cosenza. Hopefully the Bengals get their first win this week. Lord knows they need it. We'll see you.